The sun beat down mercilessly on the Arizona desert as Tom Brennan rode into the small trading post at the edge of Apache territory. He was a cattle rancher from Texas, 30 years old, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of creek water. He had come west with a herd of longhorns, hoping to establish new grazing lands and escape the overcrowded ranges back home. What he didn't expect was to find himself caught between two sisters whose rivalry would challenge everything he thought he knew about love and loyalty. It started innocently enough. Tom had been trading supplies at the post when a group of Apache riders approached. Among them were two young women who immediately caught his attention, not because of any romantic interest at first, but because of their remarkable similarity and their striking difference in demeanor. They were twins, he would later learn, though they carried themselves as differently as fire and water. The first sister, Kaya, rode at the front of the group. Her name meant wise child in Apache, and she embodied a fierce independence that seemed to radiate from her very being. She wore traditional dress adorned with intricate beadwork, her long black hair braided with leather and feathers. Her eyes were sharp and assessing, missing nothing. She was a skilled hunter and warrior, respected among her people for her courage and her refusal to be diminished by anyone. The second sister, Nahle, whose name meant loved one, rode slightly behind. She was gentler in appearance but no less striking. Where Kaya's gaze challenged, Nahle's invited. She wore similar traditional dress but had added wildflowers to her hair. She was known among her people as a healer and storyteller, someone who could calm disputes and bring peace to troubled hearts. But beneath that gentle exterior lay a will just as strong as her sister's. Tom had no intention of getting involved with either woman. He was a practical man focused on building his ranch, and he knew the dangers of relationships that crossed the cultural divide between white settlers and Apache people. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. It happened during a flash flood 3 weeks after that first meeting. Tom had been moving his cattle to higher ground when he found himself cut off by rising water. As he struggled to keep his horse steady, two riders appeared on the opposite bank, Kaya and Nahle. Without hesitation, both sisters plunged their horses into the dangerous current. Kaya reached him first, her rope already spinning. She lassoed a boulder on his side of the creek and created a line for him to follow. Nahle came alongside his panicked horse, her voice low and soothing, calming the animal with words Tom couldn't understand but whose meaning was universal. Between the two of them, they saved his life. Afterward, as they sat by a fire drying out, Tom tried to thank them. Kaya waved off his gratitude with characteristic directness. "You would have done the same," she said in surprisingly good English, learned from missionaries who had passed through years before. "Would he?" Nahle asked softly, her eyes meeting Tom's with unexpected intensity. "Not all white men see us as worth saving." Tom felt the weight of that statement and the truth in it. "Then I hope to prove I'm different," he said simply. That was the beginning. Over the following months, Tom found himself drawn deeper into the world at the edge of two cultures. The Apache band that included Kaya and Nahle had reached an uneasy peace with the local settlers, agreeing to coexist rather than fight. Tom became a bridge between the communities, using his cattle business to create trade relationships that benefited both sides. And during that time, both sisters made their interest in him clear. Kaya's approach was bold and direct. She would ride to his ranch unannounced, helping him with tasks that she deemed him incompetent at, which was most things in her assessment. She taught him to track game, to read the signs of coming weather, to understand the language of the land in ways his Anglo upbringing had never considered. With Kaya, he felt challenged and alive, constantly pushed to be better, stronger, more aware. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and red, Kaya said, "Among my people, a woman chooses her husband. She builds a wickiup, and if the man accepts her invitation to enter, they are married. I have been gathering materials for such a dwelling." Tom's heart raced. "Kaya, You don't need to answer now," she interrupted. "But know this, I don't offer this lightly. You are brave, and you try to be honorable even when it's difficult. These are qualities worth building a life upon." But Nahle's approach was equally compelling, if different. She would arrive with food she had prepared, with herbs when he was sick, with stories that made him laugh and think. She taught him about Apache spiritual beliefs, about healing practices, about the interconnection of all living things. With Nahle, he felt at peace, understood, like he could finally rest after a lifetime of struggling. One night, when he had fallen ill with fever, Nahle tended him for 3 days straight. As his fever broke, she held his hand and said softly, "My sister is a warrior, and warriors are vital to a people's survival. But so are healers, Tom. Kaya will challenge you every day. I will give you peace." Both are forms of love, but they lead to very different lives. Tom realized then the impossible position he was in. He cared for both sisters, but in different ways. Kaya ignited something fierce in him, a desire to be worthy of her respect. Nahle soothed something wounded, offering comfort he hadn't known he needed. How could he choose between fire and water when he needed both to survive? The situation came to a head during the harvest season. Tom had invited both sisters to a community gathering, not fully understanding that this would be seen as a declaration of his intentions. When both arrived, the tension was immediate. "You insult us both," Kaya said sharply, confronting him in front of the gathered crowd. "You cannot court two sisters. It dishonors our family." Nahle stood beside her sister, for once in complete agreement. "You must choose, Tom. We have been patient, but this cannot continue." Tom felt the eyes of both communities on him, white settlers and Apache alike, all waiting to see what he would do. He took a deep breath and spoke the truth that had been growing in his heart. "I can't choose," he said, and before either sister could respond in anger, he continued, "Not because I don't care, but because I care for you both differently. Kaya, you make me want to be braver, stronger, better. Nahle, you make me believe that gentleness is also a form of strength. But I've realized something else. I've been thinking about this all wrong." He turned to address everyone gathered. "I've been thinking about what I want, what I need. But that's not how this should work. Kaya, Nahle, you are both extraordinary women who deserve someone who chooses you without hesitation, without doubt, without compromise. You deserve to be someone's first choice, their only choice. And the truth is, I can't give that to either of you while I care for both of you." Kaya's eyes flashed. "So you choose neither? That's your solution." "I'm saying I'm not the right man for either of you," Tom said quietly. "And maybe you both knew that before I did." There was a long silence. Then Nahle did something unexpected. She smiled, though there were tears in her eyes. "You finally said something wise, Cowboy." Kaya shook her head, but there was grudging respect in her expression. "My sister is kinder than I am. I think you're a fool. But an honest fool at least." The gathering dispersed with a mixture of disappointment and relief. The drama everyone had been anticipating fizzled into something more mundane, a man acknowledging his own limitations. But the story didn't end there. Over the following weeks, Tom kept his distance from both sisters, focusing on his ranch and his role as a bridge between communities. He assumed that both women would move on, find men worthier of their attention. And indeed, he began to hear stories of Kaya spending time with a young Apache warrior known for his skill in battle, and of Nahle being courted by a peaceful farmer from a neighboring settlement. Yet something unexpected happened. Tom found himself invited to a ceremony by the Apache band. When he arrived, unsure of what to expect, he found both sisters waiting for him. "We have talked much since the gathering," Nahle said. "Both of us, and with our mother and grandmother. And we have concluded you were right," Kaya added. "You were not the right man for either of us. But not for the reason you think." Tom waited, confused. Nahle continued, "You were right that we each deserved someone whose choice was clear and undivided. But you were wrong about something else. You assumed that your feelings were the most important factor in this decision." "What we wanted," Kaya said with her characteristic bluntness, "was a man strong enough to choose. Not a man paralyzed by indecision. The man we each need will know his own heart clearly enough to act on it." Tom felt the words like a blow, but also like a release. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "Don't be," Nahle replied. "You taught us both something valuable." Kaya learned that strength isn't only about force, sometimes it's about honest vulnerability. "And I learned that gentleness doesn't mean accepting less than I deserve." "We came to tell you this," Kaya said, Because we don't want your guilt. We want you to understand that what happened wasn't a tragedy. It was a lesson for all three of us. In the months that followed, Tom did indeed see both sisters find partners who chose them without hesitation. Kaya married the warrior, a man whose strength matched her own, creating a partnership of equals that became legendary in their community. Nahle married the farmer, and together they built a life of quiet peace and healing, becoming a refuge for others in troubled times. Tom himself eventually met a widow from town, a practical woman named Sarah who had no illusions about romance but who wanted a partner to help raise her children and build a stable life. It wasn't the passionate fire he'd felt with Kaya or the peaceful comfort he'd known with Nahle. It was something different, a clear-eyed partnership built on mutual respect and compatible goals. Years later, Tom would sometimes see the sisters at trading gatherings. They would nod to him with friendly recognition but nothing more. The intensity of that time had faded into memory, but the lessons remained. He learned that love isn't always about grand gestures or choosing between worthy options. Sometimes it's about recognizing when you're not the right person for someone, no matter how much you care. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step aside so someone else can love them better. The two Apache sisters had fought for him, in their own ways. But in the end, they hadn't fought each other. They'd fought against his indecision, his inability to know his own heart clearly enough to act. And in losing both of them, Tom gained something more valuable. Self-knowledge and the humility to recognize that being wanted isn't the same as being right. The desert held many stories, but this one became a quiet legend. Not about a man who had to choose between two sisters, but about two sisters who chose to walk away from a man who couldn't choose at all. And in doing so, they found happiness that would have eluded them if they had won a prize that didn't truly want to be won.